Yo, how you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 146 of the Simpa Life Podcast. As you can probably hear, there's something wrong with my voice. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it is going to make for some very interesting audio. I think what I'm going to try and do is speak slower and a bit quieter so you can actually hear me enunciate my words, because as I found out this morning, when I try to hit high-pitched notes when I'm speaking, nothing happens. So this is going to be quite a bassy after hours, the after dark session, as it were, of the Simpa Life. So yeah, we need some mood lighting up in here. But yeah, I am trying to recover. Hopefully by next week, you'll be able to hear me, or I'll have lost my voice completely. Who knows? We will soon find out, I am sure. But yeah, I'm not going to keep you too long, guys, because I want to jump and segue straight into introducing today's guest, because frankly, I don't have enough words to talk shit for 5 minutes at the start of this. I'm going to get them introduced, ask some questions, and hopefully rest my voice so that I can have some good rebuttals and conversation with today's guest, who is a cannabis entrepreneur and drug law reform advocate with over 20 years experience in building and backing brands and businesses. They are the founder and CEO of Seedsman, owner and managing director of TGR Ventures, and the managing director at Pharma Seeds. They are Tom Raikes. How are you doing, Tom?
Hi, Simpa. Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. My voice is doing a little bit better than yours actually today.
Coming through crystal clear, crystal clear. I do quite like the cut out Seedsman and CBD you've got there, the wood signs.
Well, I was looking around our meeting room in our office, and the rest of the wall stuff is really quite corporate and rather boring. So I went over. It's actually a bookcase behind me that's got all that kind of a slightly empty collection, actually, because everyone keeps on coming in and pinching the books out of it. All of our team or friends of ours, basically. But for some reason, we've got these wooden cutouts that I think must have been used for a show or something back in the day, and are now gathering dust in the corner of the meeting room.
So they are a bit older, isn't that like the older font that you had for Seedsman? Have you updated the font, or am I
We
mixing it
did
up?
update the font. I think during lockdown we updated it. We had a bit of a refresh of the brand and changed our packaging, which we do kind of every 5 to 10 years. We're actually looking at it again a little bit now because it had just got a bit complicated on the last refresh, and we're now looking at simplifying it and making it keeping the same quality. The Seedsman packaging now is in a kind of biodegradable pouch. And we're just making a little bit more economical to produce, and we're trying to get a machine that will automate the whole packing process, which is quite exciting if and when we can do that.
Nice, nice. So yeah, I suppose before we move on to talking about sort of I guess, the businesses that you work with and kind of what you are currently doing, how and when did you first sort of get involved with cannabis, so we can kind of give a chronology to our listeners?
Sure. So I kind of started smoking cannabis myself when I was pretty young, younger than probably what we're allowed to encourage these days, at kind of 14 or so. By the time I was at university, I was doing a degree in Newcastle on, started off as an agricultural business management degree, and then through choice of modules ended up as food marketing. My cousin at the time, who I was close to, had a company selling hemp, producing hemp foods and selling hemp foods down in near Brighton, just outside Brighton, a company called Mother Hemp. So that was in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And I did a big dissertation on the potential for hemp as a food ingredient, 20,000 word dissertation, my final dissertation of the kind of course, and based it around his company, and he helped provide information for it. And then after university, I was set, he'd offered me a job, but starting with a couple months work experience. And yeah, so I went and did a couple of months work experience for Mother Hemp. We were selling hemp snack bars, dairy-free ice cream, gluten-free pasta, a little bit before a lot of this stuff was popular, which was probably part of the problem, and why in the end he decided to sell that business, as it wasn't making as much money. I think he was struggling to break even at that stage and having to spend lots of money educating people on the benefit of eating hemp food stuff, so hemp oil or seed, shelled seeds and the like. And so in the end, I did 2 months work there, and then he goes, I don't have a permanent job for you there, but how about we set up a seed business? And we'd spent many a kind of night staying up smoking, discussing our passion for cannabis, and it made sense. It was legal, interesting, and the kind of right side of controversial, that we wanted to get a discussion going around legalization. And the idea really was to create a brand that was suddenly on the edge, but that would come through into a time and help fund and encourage legal change.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's always interesting how cannabis kind of ends up, I wasn't going to say hijacking, but sort of redirecting, very gently nudging us towards different things in our lives. We often start with a certain belief of who we are and the trajectory that we think our lives are going to follow, and she kind of helps just push us along that way. And it very much sounds like that was your experience.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, I think things kind of fell in that direction, and then everything lined up in the end. My cousin was very passionate. He had the finances to put in at that time. I had the time, and the kind of eagerness to do it, and a marketing background from my university days, which actually, having not been that interested in the university days, because I was probably smoking too much weed, actually was really useful when I started putting it into practice, and we started designing packaging, you know, leaflets, point of sales material to get into shops and to make sure that our products were nicely displayed. And yeah, it all started coming together, but it was the plant essentially that pushed us that way. We knew we needed to do it. My cousin had made a load of very interesting contacts in his in the hemp business that were producing seeds, cannabis seeds, and others that had really just useful connections for us getting into the cannabis industry.
Nice, nice. So Seedsman are out there. Yeah, is it white labeling and producing your own as well as wholesaling?
So we don't we get asked this a lot, and some people denigrate us for not producing our own. We don't, and we never have pretended to produce our own, and never have produced our own. That was often one step over the law that we didn't want to go into. So we've always worked with breeders from day one. We worked with a guy known as Sam the Skunk Man, or Dave Watson, who was responsible for creating a lot of the kind of most foundational strains really that have been used in modern breeding. So Skunk Number One, Original Haze, and those kind of varieties. He had a license to grow and produce in Holland at the time, and eventually sold all the rights to his varieties to GW Pharmaceuticals on one side, but then on the other, out the back door, I think he was selling to us. So he was our first supplier. We then started working with some South African seed producers who are maintaining kind of South African land race lines, Malawi Gold, Swazi Rooibos, Durban Poison, which we really wanted to focus on because part of the business was really trying to preserve genetics like that often were kind of facing persecution in their country of origin from law enforcement, often funded by the US. And we really thought that there was value in these varieties and that they needed to be maintained and kept. So for us, it was getting them out to kind of seed collectors and growers where we could.
Yeah, I think that's something that is invaluable. It's some of the things that different corners of the community may criticize some larger companies like Greenhouse, etc., and say that there is some exploitation. I'm not putting a judgment on that, but I think that, as you said, the argument there is a solid one of diversifying and putting these. I mean, I've got quite a healthy seed collection in my fridge. You know, I eat a lot of vegetables, but there isn't much space for vegetables in my drawers in the fridge because I'm the same. Like just a nerd for collecting them under this idea that if I can be this nerdy and others are, these will never die.
And there are a lot of people like you. We find in Europe, in the UK, particularly in the US, and just with that higher disposable income in the US, there are some really big collectors with some very interesting strains. And actually, we find that a lot of these kind of collectors really hold some of the true old school varieties that we'll need to bring back at some day, as that over hybridization has suddenly happened.
Yeah, and that's what the other side of it is something I've always wanted to see, which is the holding of, I suppose, what have become either heirlooms or land races in various regions, like you say, that are being destroyed to such a level that it risks, you say, losing whole generations of different cultivars and chemovars. Of a rewilding in those areas when eventually, hopefully, touch fucking wood, the war will end around the world and we can look at that and go, well, what were the original Hawaiian strains? Let's go back there. What were the original African strains? Like, here, let's give this shit back and see what it can renaturalize in its environment, because then it'll open up those branches of different evolution that we haven't really seen within the genetics.
And that's absolutely true. And I haven't traveled as extensively like I could. And I know in a lot of those kind of areas where you would find landrace varieties, they have brought in other varieties as well to help improve the lines. And a lot of people hate that, but you know, it has happened and it does still happen. And actually, you know, a lot of these varieties got to the places they were by human intervention in the first place. So yeah, there's a lot
that's
we
where I
can do,
suppose we
and
get
there's a lot we've got to
that.
be cautious of. But I think, like you say, is and no mention of greenhouse, but anyone who is collecting from these kind of places is making sure that they help benefit the kind of local indigenous populations if borrowing natural resources from them.
Yeah, and that's all I really ask of any really company or entity that is doing that. It's a trade. You've got to trade. If you're taking something from that, granted you are helping champion in that name and that region, as it were, and whatever else. But it's it often. I mean, I think actually this is from a greenhouse documentary. I think it's like two point something million people at the lowest end of economics around the world still rely on cannabis as their only cash crop.
Yeah, and a lot of those, we work with some teams in South Africa where we have a bit of a presence. And actually the guy from Simon Strain Hunter we work quite closely with, who works with a lot of the tribes people in various places in South Africa. And he's working with some, you know, very poor communities that aren't necessarily seeing the benefit of changes to the law in South Africa. And actually, you know, when these legal changes come that a lot of people have fought for, they're not always the best for a lot of the people that have been operating on a legacy basis. And I think that's really sad and a massive missed opportunity personally.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I don't think this of just for I champion, obviously, British growers, British cannabis culture. I mean, if you look, you say like further afield where there aren't other options, there aren't other real choices. I grow cannabis because my granddad grew cannabis, his granddad grew cannabis. This is what we have on the land. This is the resource that we have. This is our home, our ancestral lands. I'd want that to be like wine almost. That's the way I see the future of cannabis
$100%.
is certain regions are championed as, yes, you may be able to try and replicate that in a grow room wherever, but there'll still be that premium and that thing on that because you're paying for their generations of learning and tradition and heritage, you know?
Yeah, 100%. We've always, from day one, as our kind of companies, as an organization, really favored the wine model. And actually, we had a wine business at one stage. But for me, it is by far the most interesting model that involves, or can involve easier legacy growers, as well as people coming in from new walks of life, encouraged by changes in the law, but that actually also allow people who know what they're doing to show off their real passion in their product and to really get it noticed. But also, you know, if that was to operate on an international level as well, personally, I think it would be a really exciting market where, you know, you can bring in Moroccan hashes or charis from you know, wherever you want to get it from. And those regions start being properly recognized and able to trade legally, albeit, you know, you need to bring in quality standards and the like. And I don't think anyone would be afraid of that, although as long as they're not too ridiculous and too onerous.
I suppose if it was based on the quality of the product rather than what we're seeing with corporate legalization around the world, based on artificial regulations and restrictions. So, you need to meet this rule, this rule, this rule that has nothing to do with the product. Well, that's what we're seeing with EU GMP and various other things within the prescription spaces. It's the products themselves are very lightly regulated per the product. But once you get into the packaging and selling it in that market in Schedule 2, it tapers to a point where, your facility you need X amount of money to hold it in your facility. You need X amount to be able to distribute it. And you just see what I'm saying, like that startup capital and cost is then artificially restrictive, where again, I want to see that what I was kind of hoping Thailand would do, but unfortunately there's a lot of external pressures and forces that, as you say, instead of it championing.
I think while there's still a kind of prohibition in the US, it won't open up fully. That's to the full potential. I understand to a level. Obviously, medical needs to be a lot cleaner and everything else than recreational. But actually, we want to try and achieve higher standards in everything. But finding ways to do that, like you say, don't keep everybody else out who doesn't have.
I think
or whatever you need to set up a facility in the UK.
Yeah, I think if we look at the regulation of crops, so the thing of like class, like a class one, class two. I don't know if we have class three of like onions, apples, tomatoes. Do you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
we grade them, and there's obviously at the production side of there's certain pesticides, certain things that can't then go into it at this level. And there's then randomized testing and various other regulations, and there's still manipulations of the system at any large industry. But the general idea is obviously to minimize the potential exposure. Obviously, I mean, phosphates. We'll not go into that. But my point being that obviously at
Mm.
that scale of commercial industry, whereas then Dave down in his allotment, he could grow enough onions to pass out to 20 families.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
exactly. And they do
but
farmers markets and the
it's then
like.
his level. But then he could also take that crop, go to it, like you said, a market, and have a grade classified to it with a
Yeah,
basic, like a nerd with a clipboard. It's not all this legal and all the huge amount of bolsterous, bloated, sorry, industry that they've created attached to this. It could literally
yeah.
be here's an international standards of cannabis. Are you grade one, grade two, grade three? And like you said, that would then brings everybody up because nobody would want to, if they're wanting good money, you then have to produce a good product. And if everybody knows what a good product is,
Exactly.
the same would be good cannabis is good cannabis wherever you are in the world. You may have a different preference in terms of the experience of it due to like the VSCs, the flavonoids, terpenes, those kind of compounds. But the plant itself is still the plant. But like I say, I
100%.
want to travel to regions like I was saying, but to Thailand and have the best Thai stick. Have the best of like what was your original? What was I'm thinking the Thai 74. What the hell was that? Going way back into my own knowledge here. But yeah, this anyway, some of like the really old Thai stuff that ended up getting bred into like what became blue cheese and things like that. Because again, with the legacy and heirlooms of cultivars, where yeah, we took land races from other areas and they've naturalized, they've escaped, they've wilded, and they've had different genomic expressions in themselves to then become completely different plants effectively. And
Yeah.
now, as we like I said, we're collecting them back. I want to see what that region produces. I don't want to see cookies produced in that region. No offense to cookies, it was just what came to mind. But then that's what I mean is instead of it, those areas being championing that thing, I don't want it to be a McDonald's. Cannabis shouldn't be McDonald's. It can be
Yeah,
and
and
it
there
will
will be
be.
a little bit that needs to play out as there's suddenly in the genetic space, there's and I mean, you'll see this in dispensaries anywhere, is, one person's Jack Herrera or White Widow in one dispensary is quite significantly different to another dispensary. And as much as regulation terrifies us, I do think there are areas where it will bring good things actually for the consumer in the end.
Mhm.
We try as much as possible to kind of self-regulate. But yeah, there are certainly some areas where I think it'll be interesting seeing the right regulations come in, if hopefully the right regulations do come in.
Yeah, I think we either have to get to a point of genetic mapping and being able to look at an individual chemovar, an established plant from any cultivar lineage, and map that in such a way. In my head, it's almost like it's you
It's very
digitize.
difficult because you still get
Yeah,
phenotypic plasticity, things growing
yeah.
you still get that
Well,
variation.
and
I
you'll
don't
and
know.
you yeah, you'll always get mutations and everything else as well. But it's almost it's finding enough of a marker is what I'm trying to say. That like you said, if you're seeing that's Jack Herrera, it needs to at least have
Yeah.
but we the only way to do it is almost through a digital AI model. And that is kind of inevitable. There are a lot of people working in the AI cannabis space. That's going mental over there,
So
kind
we
of.
just released for Seedsman our AI customer service bot, Barbara, who we launched about 2 weeks ago, who's been invaluable already. She's up and working 24/7,
Can I ask why
letting people know
Barbara?
where their orders are. If they've had any small issues, she can handle them. She suddenly collects a lot more information and just makes the whole process much more quicker and efficient. So we're really
Hmm.
excited by AI.
Is Barbara an acronym or was that somebody's mum?
Well, no, really good question. We it's a bit of a placeholder name. We knew that we had to give the bot a name to give it a bit of a personality. We did a bit of kind of superficial reading on these things, and you're told, to go for someone who, well, what are the things that you want to give over? So we wanted to give over that they were competent, worked hard, slightly older, and kind of responsible and knowledgeable.
I was
And
going to
so
say she does
we
sound
kind of
like the
came
school
up with your Aunt
receptionist.
Barbara kind of thing, who American style, who's been growing for many years. So she's plugged into various different grow information. So she's got great grow knowledge as well for those where it is legal to grow. And yeah, she's there and feeds back instantaneously.
Nice, nice. You don't have to reply to this. I'm just saying this for my audience. VPNs can change where you appear to be, folks. That's just some sidebar, irrelevant information for anybody that needs to know it. But yeah, exactly. Things like that. It's the customer servicing, but also now people doing it with mapping genetics together for prospective breeding products. Like I
Yeah.
said, the people are like, and I appreciate the tech and what's going into that, but I also feel the research and the standardization of knowledge, if that's all proprietary technology, I feel like we then miss if we don't all know what cannabis is, how can we all have a cannabis industry? You know what I'm
Yeah, the
saying?
problem I see with this, though, and it is kind of exciting in that standardization, but you'll then find that it's only one or two companies that are doing that. And they're not
Mm,
just doing it for the wider good. I can tell you that, as I've
yeah.
met a few of these people that run these businesses or operate in them. And they're the kind of companies a lot of the time that would, like to be sole operators in markets. So
Mm,
our kind of wish to things to be a little bit clearer may cause us problems in the long run. So we do have to definitely move forward with caution. And what may happen is just actually, as a brand, you get known for your type of blueberry or whatever it is, and you've then just got to make sure it's consistent with your own brand and get that recognition yourself.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we're seeing people breaking from what used to be kind of the older tradition of, okay, I've crossed X and Y, I'll make the name this plus this. There'll be something in the nomenclature of it that kind of describes its lineage and its provenance, as it were. Whereas then people, I think, now are getting more creative with more the pheno hunting, as it were, and getting 100 seeds of whatever of that cross. And then from that, I mean, we ended up with the whole gelato thing of 33s and 41s and da-da-da and da-da-da. And so there's that on one side of people holding that so you can almost follow that back. And then the other are people that go across, I'm not telling you, in-house secret, as it were, and they build a brand on top of that.
Yeah. So with us, I mean, like I said, we started off, we worked with Dave to begin with, and now we work with a number of breeders. Because we're a kind of seed supermarket, we work
I like
with
that.
20, 30, 40 different breeders, selling them and helping them market their own products. And increasingly now we're moving seeds across kind of international boundaries with plant health paperwork and the like, which not everyone can do. But it gets us to be able to speak with the breeders we work with on their own product lines, and we bring in a varieties and a collection under our Seedsman brand that works for us. And we've tried to be as amplified as possible with our own range. So we have some less, good sellers, but that are interesting to the kind of medical or people that are interested in more minor cannabinoids. So CBDV, THCV. Then these aren't big sellers, but we keep them in the catalog. And then we have your more, kind of heavier setting indicas and the like. And increasingly now, actually, we're focusing on varieties that will go well outdoors in northern or wetter parts. So looking at fast and early strains as well, which weren't that easy to find previously and are now being produced in quite big scale. They're a kind of byproduct of producing auto varieties, but we find those really interesting. Suddenly for certain climates, for people who are growing, in states in the US, for example, where it's legal, where it's a bit damper, short summers and wet autumns, who want to get a good crop in outdoors.
Yeah, and again, I think that's where the awareness kind of sorry, the awareness of the land races and the kind of heirlooms and their adaptability, because I think that's the one thing that makes cannabis the weed that it is its adaptability. Is you may kill it within one cycle in one environment, but if it was that in the wild,
Yeah.
as it were, she'll self-harm me because she's so sexually frustrated. The seeds can lay dormant for like 20 years in an environment till it becomes more beneficial to them. And so it tries to adapt to any space to it. And I think, as you say, we're seeing in spaces where it's then lawful to do so, people instead of just get the crop up, get it done, get it out. Do you know what I mean? People can play with it a bit more. They can see it. They can have that. I say this with love every time, but it's sometimes a contentious word. The nerdiness of it. I'm a weed nerd.
Yeah. I
You
mean,
know what I
and we
mean?
have, we have a lot of nerds that are customers of ours. We love them. We did a customer survey in, I think it was about 2001 or 2002. And we got 16,000 replies through our site, and just all these beautifully nerdy responses from people that, just hate the part of the year when they have to kill their plants because they've just spent so much time nurturing them, to the real passion. We had a lot of open-ended answers, and just the passion and was amazing running through these all. I mean, not all of them, but a large chunk of them. But our job, certainly in the US, where we sell a lot of seeds and where it's legal in a lot of states, our job really is making sure that we're leading people, growers, home growers, to buy the seeds that are going to work for them, not just allow them to get carried away by name or the like, but to try and get varieties, especially when growing outside, that are going to fit their natural, their environment, where they're growing, what part of their garden, and that are going to be successful for them, so that they have a good crop. They're able to smoke that, share it, and so they come back the next year. And that's really what we've kind of been focusing on, particularly on the Seedsman website, really.
No, and you've obviously been doing incredibly well with it. You are definitely the most well-known, I think, UKC seed brand, or well, as in wholesaler. There are obviously a few sort of independent companies that have got some quite big reputations, as you say, most of which you guys obviously stock, if not all. I couldn't tell you who I'm thinking of. I'm just pulling sort of names out my ass there, but you probably do stock them. But it's interesting. So you obviously have alluded to it's a lot easier in various regions in the US. Obviously, it's not federally sort of legalized or decriminalized. It's obviously there's the scheduling conflict right now. But you guys recently launched a clone service. Can you, tell us what that's about?
So we are selling clones in states where there's recreational and medical cultivation is legal. Under the 2018 Farm Bill, clones and seeds were made legal on a federal level to sell. And we're working with a partner out of Oregon, who's been a clone supplier for many years, and we decided to add them onto our site. We've always been trying to be kind of first to do things in the industry, or looking at how we can innovate, how we can push things a little bit. And not that we're the first to sell clones. There's a few other websites doing it, but we're probably the first of one of the big seed banks, I would say, to start doing it. And we're excited to see what happens. It's as far as all of our legal opinions, and we spoke to various lawyers on it, it's fully legal, and we wanted to start doing it. We'd love to be selling clones in Europe, in the UK, everywhere else, but obviously we've got to see some legal change there. But in the meantime, this gives us the ability to service the American market, to familiarize ourselves with this as a product type, to hone in our skills. Shipping live products around a country as big as the US isn't always easy, especially as most of the couriers don't want to work with you either. So we're just learning, and at the moment we're not really pushing them that widely yet, but we hope to, I think, probably come September. And that they're, I would say, relatively expensive. We've had to keep them that way, but we still have a big range of seeds and things at the moment. But shipping clones, live plants is a next day service, and it's expensive shipping them, and so they're definitely not in the price range where we'd like to have them ultimately at the moment.
Okay, but obviously, yeah, scalability, like you say. So under the Hemp Act, or the Agricultural Reform, whatever the hell long title
Farm
it is,
Bill.
I can't think of. Yeah, Farm Bill, I just Hemp Act or Farm Bill, whatever.
Yeah.
That act anyway. So are these clones part of this THCA loophole?
No, they are any seed or plant that is under 0.3% THC content in its element when you're sending it is considered hemp. Even
so
if
as
it
long as
later
it's
grows up to be a cannabis marijuana plant.
so they've done the Austrian. I was saying Austria there, guys. I know my voice is cracked. I'm not saying Australia. The Austrian kind of model of
It's similar,
until it's flat, until it's flowered. Yeah, I think, which is a sensible approach. You can't then do somebody for possession of THC if the thing hasn't produced THC yet. You can't arrest somebody for future crime. This is not Minority Report.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure they'll change that. When we first kind of came across that change to the rule, it looked like it had been written by absolutely kind of pro-cannabis geniuses who snuck it through, or some complete idiots. But I think actually what we've seen now, they're looking to reschedule cannabis, is it's probably part of a general process to free up this market really, and to start bringing in agricultural practices into it. So we import a lot of seeds into the US. We move them over in their cannabis seed packaging with all of the necessary paperwork that we need. So they come in past the US Department of Agriculture, where they get stamped and come in, and then we're able to sell and distribute from there. And we work with a lot of the big European seed brands to help distribute their product in the US. Yeah, so that's where it is. It's really opened up, changed our business. It means we're now interacting with the US Department of Agriculture, which for us is really exciting. We want to be working with these kind of people to keep improving our business and the way we do things, and bring them into, agricultural, horticultural standards.
No, yeah, interesting. I suppose this is a two-part question that kind of goes in two different directions, but I'm going to ask it and you can kind of choose how you want to assemble your answer, because they're the two that came to mind. One is, how were you affected by sort of post-Brexit regulation? Because prior, obviously, it was just souvenirs. There was a simple trade code. Boom, it went through borders. Obviously, now needed, or from my reading, when the rules changed, you needed a plant passport, effectively. I can't remember the name of the actual document offhand. And there were excess regulations that were going to be sort of placed upon. The other part to that, or I suppose, is actually kind of separate. So these maybe are two different questions. Do you think then the issue of how large and how kind of convoluted the air quotes hemp industry has become in the States, like with all of the synthetics and everything, do you think that's going to butt heads with a potential Schedule 3? Or do you think they'll
I
use
don't know
exactly
so
what you
much. I
said
mean,
to allow it,
we've had a little look at those kind of hemp derivatives, and we don't know much about it. We've had one of our partners who was trying to encourage us to enter that market with the Seedsman brand, but I'm not convinced that it's the right market for it. We have a client base over there of people that buy seeds, and maybe some of them are interested in those products, but I don't know enough about it at this stage, so I'm probably not the person to ask. On the Brexit subject, I thought it was a bit disastrous. It did open up some possibilities for us, actually, that we started Pharma Seeds, which was really meant to kind of start working with licensed companies on their seeds, which it opened up some possibilities for that, but actually they weren't very commercial in the end, and we've almost sidelined that business. But for the Seedsman side of things, the Brexit didn't really help. We ended up having to have a warehouse in Spain, a warehouse in the UK, and a warehouse in the US to service all the different markets, when before we serviced the UK from our office in Malaga in southern Spain. So it's just been a cost, and it makes it slower. I think, like anyone who's running a business in the UK, they've probably all found similar things with Brexit. I'm not sure of too many actually that have seen all these benefits that we were told about by Boris Johnson and the like.
Yeah. I think of I can't remember his name, the guy that runs Weatherspoons. He's very much eating some humble pie right now.
Tim, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus. Yeah. We're not going to get.
I think he shut down a lot of pubs, hasn't he? Since
and it's definitely not looking good, because obviously they drove out competition, and it's that kind of mechanism of an overly dominant player is what I fear for the cannabis industry, whatever country it is within, is somebody that is so focused on profit, market share, and capture, that they lessen the potential of the plant, of the people, of the suppressed culture of us. I keep making the argument that once we're allowed to be out of the grow closet, not just in like, oh, I smoke weed, but to be able to be eccentric, nerdy, to share everything we've learned without fear of losing our kids, our jobs, our houses, we
100%.
move forward so much.
Yeah, and I mean, there's still already obviously lots of different groups on Facebook, on all the different platforms, Discord and things. But you're right, it can't be done openly. Some people do it openly, and can do because it's legal, and others can't because it's not legal, and some do where it's not legal. But yeah, there's so much that can play out, so much education that can come out, and really is, again, a thing that we've been really focused on over the years, because we believe in it and because it's good for our business, is that community element around the cannabis industry of, getting people to teach other people what they're doing, what their experience, and to keep sharing knowledge. Really, it's like growing vegetables or anything. You've never really got to the top where you can't do it any better.
Yeah, I always kind of go to the anecdote of the companies that run industry. Like my granddad used to say, "Bah, I'm not buying those tomatoes, son. Tastes like crap." It was Yorkshire man. And it was on tomatoes, and it was, granted, I didn't eat tomatoes, like raw, fresh tomatoes. I don't like them. But whenever he made it into something that he'd cook, I'd be like, yeah, there's a lot more life to it. There's something so much more to it that in order to standardize and get to the level of that monocrop of culture, as it were, of that product, it loses something. And I think that's cannabis has this extra, the je ne sais quoi, that extra
Oh,
element that it can't, I don't think, be scaled to that level. She won't let it.
yeah, and I think this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, is when you look at legal models for drugs, you've got something like the wine, as we discussed, or something like tobacco, where there's really not much quality, different or taste differences or pride in the product. It's just, a product that's sold for profit. Hence why we love that wine model that we discussed previously.
Yeah, it takes
We
it
want
from
the
this.
passion. You want the passion, because I think the passion also um, helps just be rid of the much more of the problems. There are some people who have problematic cannabis use, and I think it's much negated by having an industry like that kind of wine model, rather than a kind of tobacco style model where no one really loves the product they're selling.
So yeah, it needs to be, and this is what I keep arguing is I feel that legalization, or as I call it, like new legalization, NU legalization, is this kind of corporate capture model of get them the most amount of drug as possible for the most amount of profit. So this is how we've seen, yes, there was an acceleration in sort of street breeding, as it were, where we have accelerated up certain cannabinoids as a consequence of people wanted to feel couch lock. They wanted a heavy head. They had a certain expectation of what cannabis should be. So people started tapering towards that. That's kind of how we ended up in the Stardog Avenue in this country for so long. It's gassy, gives us a head, and I'm like a bit locked in. That's what most people think the whole cannabis experience is. And so it leads, they say, that expectations, then other things are developed for that. Whereas if then the other people are brought into it and go, oh, well, actually, it can be this as well. And that uplifting experience. And so it being about how you consume it, who you consume it with. And so many of these lawful models around the world are no, you can buy it, but you can't consume it unless you're in your house by yourself, or you can invite friends around, obviously. But if you're in a rented accommodation, under most
Yeah.
protocols in legal states, you can't do it if your landlord has it in his policy that you're not allowed to do it. You can't smoke it in the street. You can't smoke it in parks. You go to a national park, that's federal law. You're risking some serious shit there. Like whereas if we focus like Malta are trying to do, granted their restrictions are so arbitrary, like 50 grams possession at home for 4 plants cultivation. Make that math make sense, dude. Like
Yeah, I think Germany's just brought in, we were being told yesterday, with 3 plants and you're able to have 50 grams. So,
and it's 3 plants per year as well, or at least
right.
that's what it was in the first draft. I haven't read the
Certainly with
finalized
50
published
grams,
version.
you don't want to be growing too big a plants. So, yeah, watch out which strains you're buying.
Well, this is going to lead to interesting things because Germany used to be. Sorry about my voice, folks. Sorry, Tom.
No problems.
um, Germany used to be. You would basically get charged on cumulative THC. So, like with weight of product, they would then take into consideration, well, is this like low THC or whatever? Yeah, that'd be considered less of a charge. And they would seek less back from POCA, their version of like Proceeds of Crime Act. And it would take it to like less of degrees of severity, as it were, under the law. And so I think they've kind of transitioned that over in their heads. And I think what they'll probably end up doing is adapting to this and being, oh, wait, if it's going to
Oh,
be like
yeah.
high THC stuff, maybe that's 50. But if it's got CBD in it, maybe you can have X. And then all they're going to do is make it more and more convoluted. And the German police are already like, we can't enforce this.
Yeah, I
That's to
mean, I
knock on
don't.
every door and measure the plants. And like, have you got any more hidden? That's 4. Look, technically that seed broke and double-headed. You had a freak that double-headed. That's 4
I
plants.
can't see anyone enforcing this too much. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but they're going to have their hands full, because there's a lot of new growers in Germany. We've suddenly seen a big spike in orders, and I know a lot of the big seed companies have had massive spikes in orders going to Germany. So there is a huge uptake in cannabis cultivation in that country, and whether they'll all stick to 3 plants and 50 grams, I think they will struggle to, personally, because those numbers don't really kind of work together. But I guess as a regulator or politician trying to put something through when you've got opposition, maybe that was the easy way to do it, is start with numbers, low numbers. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I can
so
only see progress, I think. And I would imagine that will keep going.
I think, yeah, they've done exactly what Thailand kind of did. They will change the law. So, God, my voice. They will change the law in Thailand, as the ruling party are now seeking to do, to reverse kind of what was done, but they cannot go back to the status quo.
Yeah.
The previous government had a policy where they tried to basically make 1 million people home growers. I don't know if they ever went through with their ambitious thing of giving, what was it, like 12 clones per family or some shit was initially pitched.
Brilliant.
But because of the amount of money and everything else that's gone into that, communities before that didn't really have much access to a cash crop of such value, especially to Westerners and tourists, if they suddenly try and cut that under, the next Thailand will emerge and people will just go there. And so
Yeah.
we're going to end up with this global tourism and this money moving around, and frankly, doing the same thing that a lot of the criminal gangs did, which was take money from the consumers of each region and take it back to their little territories or hoard it in their communities. The same will happen with the corporates until there is that kind of global conversation. And my question would be then, because obviously you work in quite a lot of international markets,
Yeah.
do you think we're far away from the UN and that having this conversation, actually going, well, if fucking Canada's done it, America's going to do this, and
I
Uganda's
mean,
done
now
this,
you've seen this
Uruguay, sorry.
reclassification in the States and Germany. They've got to be I mean, they're crazy not having these discussions with such big, important countries, or the most important countries in certainly in Europe, the US. It would be crazy not to. I mean, Germany will start having an impact on the rest of Europe, and there must be other countries ready to follow suit.
I think
Sad thing
Luxembourg.
is, for some reason, I don't know why Spain are so hesitant on it. They seem to have the largest kind of legal or grey market cannabis industry of companies, organizations paying taxes, working with the banking institutions who are friendly in Spain, yet the authorities don't seem friendly, which I think is very sad. And I'm a massive Hispanophile and love it there. But I would love to see some change in Spain. It's got the climate for it. France, again, a nation full of cannabis smokers. Also real passion for growing produce in France. We want to start seeing all of these countries start moving. A lot of their populations have already started moving forward with their plans. We now need the governments to legitimize them and to start enabling them to do it cleanly and properly and legally without risk.
Yeah, 100%. For me, agree everything to the sentiment, almost except the last sort of phrasing of it, that it's the end of criminalization. Because when I see legalization, it's, oh, jump through this loophole now, pay this guy, then pay that guy, and then, yeah, you're all right. And then 5 months later, oh, no, but you've got to pay this guy now. And then I feel that restrictive model, it instantly takes it out of the hands of, frankly, most dealers are of lower class. And I don't mean that as making a class assessment or an offense to anybody. I mean that generally, sort of speaking, what we consider to be your low dealers that are dealing and surviving, they're doing that because they've looked at the economic situation around them, and that's what they're doing.
This is my easiest way to get my family out of it. Yeah, absolutely.
But by doing it, they get locked out then of legalization, like what happened in Canada and other spaces where people that did the thing that showed that they should do it, as soon as the government came in, they went, you're a criminal. And it feels like there is this impediment in any of the markets where there is this thing of, but you were doing it before. And it should be the other thing of going, yes, I was doing it before, which means I'm educated. Why am I not the front of the queue, not the back?
That's why you need really progressive politicians, sadly, to get these things through. People that are going to fight for those and go, they want the change to help these people rather than just to make a few bankers drop out of banking and start growing cannabis. Is actually, we want this for social benefit. We want these changes to improve society, not just so a load of rich people can get richer. And then if you do start looking at all those benefits, is how do we stagger these? How do we get the most amount of people involved? How do we reduce the harms? How do we clean up the money side of things? How do we get taxes where it should be taxed, and that's my view.
100%. And as I keep advocating, and I will always advocate for, is this kind of parlay between all parties. Like, we need that kind of truth and reconciliation committee like they had in South Africa after apartheid, and they brought everybody together and everybody got to testify from all sides and just speak of what has happened, their experience, what they did. People were able to, in that space, kind of start to draw a line under what was and build what will be. And I think at the minute, a lot of those people that we're just speaking of, the dealers, the people that were legacy that keep this moving, the reason that half of those parents know that the cannabis works for their kids is because these people broke the law to help them.
Yeah,
Like
it's
it's
big risks,
yeah, so
absolutely.
we need, but we also need the bankers and whatever else. I don't know fucking how to make quarterly profits go up. I'm not a HR person. I am not, do you know, I know what I know, basically what I'm saying. It takes a big tent. And at the minute, I feel like the money's making very grand tents and gestures and whatever. But if you look at the longevity of a lot of these companies, as I'm sure you probably smile at with your legacy, they come and they fucking go. They come up, the money comes in, and they go, and they try and learn this stuff on the fly and adapt to a market that isn't there. Do you know what I mean? Because they're
Yeah.
denying there's this fuck you ability in the cannabis consumer where we're just like, no, you've criminalized us for decades. You've ruined our lives and shit. You're suddenly going to come in unless you represent us and include us. Fuck you.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these companies though that come in, I think because they're more widely funded by they're a little bit irresponsible with how they do things a lot of the time, because they're playing with lots of other people's money, and so they're a bit more fly of the night, I think. Our
Mm,
view has always been, growing your own business over time and having that passion in it is the most stable way to do it.
mm. No, I agree. It's authenticity. I think that's the thing that we kind of detect because cannabis is such a nascent industry and it's twinned with an ongoing criminalization and persecution. So you can read in a newspaper one article that's the miracle plant, child's life saved. The next thing, skunk dealers. Do you know what I
So
mean? And kids on
yeah,
bikes, and
and
it's these duality of the
the
reality that is
real
just
irony
so.
is for someone who's been working in the industry with both ends of that spectrum. When we started up Pharma Seeds, we were looking at, and it was slightly winding that business down, but we were looking at selling to licensed companies in the UK, in Europe, and globally. And the one thing that all of them were asking for, and was top of their one list, was that they had the highest levels of THC possible. And yet you still read in the Daily Mail that medical cannabis is okay. It's different from street cannabis,
Yeah.
which just to me, and there were a few people within the medical cannabis community that were kind of expunging this kind of nonsense, which I thought was just, yeah, ridiculous, but makes me a little bit sad, but also kind of chuckle inwardly in a sad fashion. Yeah, the media bullshit.
Yeah, and I think it's yeah these artificial binaries, these false dualities that are created consequentially either as a consequence of like the law change of repression of culture and education and information, but it creates in the non-initiated a misunderstanding of the reality. So people with the perpetuation of so-called hemp and that language, people go, well, as I've seen a lot of companies, and I love to call them out on it, our CBD comes from the hemp plant doesn't exist. It's a fabricated lie and narrative. It's just to get around saying that it's cannabis sativa or sort of thing. So it kind of creates that binary. The same with the CBD industry as a consequence of its marketing. That's in a way why we end up with THC bad, CBD good, and all got to be ratioed, and that it's only the cannabinoids. We've lost the nuanced conversation of like you could smoke a 30% of a certain profiled VCS and flavonoid and terpene, we could smoke the same thing and have two different reactions. You could fall asleep on the couch and I could be bouncing off the walls. Like there isn't sort of a standardization in that, which is why they're going to THC CBD is for two reasons ultimately. One, under licensing in the UK, cannabis is only a cannabinoid delivery system for the processing of two primary cannabinoids. So you're prescribed cannabis flower to give you access just to THC and just to CBD. That's the only thing that it's allowed for. Everything else is considered a contaminant by the NHS or by
All right.
MHRA, sorry.
Yeah.
So that's why it's off label because of all of the contaminations. And by you having this private connection, the conversation with your clinic, you basically take on discretion. And it goes into Schedule 2 instead of Schedule 1, which gives you permission to possess it and to not be done under Section 5A of the 1988 Road Traffic Act. There's a few other defenses it gives you, obviously, but
Sure.
it does help. But yeah, these artificial binaries, to loop back to my question, I'm getting there. It does feel like unless we have, like I said, the bottom is lifted up and there isn't this one group. So to Germany, I think I agree. They're not going to enforce that three plants unless it bothers them about that person.
I think
All I
unless
can
it's
see.
unless it's way over, they're going to have more work than they had
Well,
before they legalized it. So
yes,
it
no,
just
but
seems
I
counterproductive.
feel it just leaves the discretion there. In that, if that then cop turns up, he could turn up and yeah, and find there's 5 plants in that, and he could be like, I don't give a shit. If it's
Yeah,
I don't know, if it's somebody of a different race or ethnicity or group that they have a prejudice towards, they could then take that 4 plants and use that as a reason. Do you get what I'm saying here? It's same with the
yeah,
25,
sure.
25 grams is the limits on the street, etc. If any of these things, wherever there is a limit, yes, most people will get away with it. If you're white middle class and you're a tourist, we're not a tourist because obviously Germany's only a domestic model, not tourist model.
Mm.
There is going to be that kind of issue, and I think it, as you say, it does just feel like it's bureaucrats, it's politicians going, here's the numbers, here's the thing. This, yeah, that won't lose us too many with the grannies voting for us, but it'll bring on enough of the youth and it deals with this market, so we don't have to think about this. But it creates more false realities where then we've got to go, well, why is that piece of paper mean that guy can have 7.0 THC in his blood, but that guy has 0.3 in his blood per liter, and he's done for driving under the influence? Like we create these things where the science breaks down, the logic breaks down. Because again, cannabis, I can make everything out of hemp from cannabis, from a
Yeah.
high THC cannabis plant. And so we have to break down those. I think unless there is that standardization of education, and that only comes from, frankly, us being in that room. We don't want to be the rich guys. And actually, if you include our education, you'll be richer. You could have another Ferrari because your market share will go up and you'll make more money because you'll then be actually selling products people want. You'll be talking in a way that people understand what the hell you're saying rather than going, oh, we're selling HHC, Delta 8, and this and that and that and this and that. No, take your money and help us fight for THC, then join the market.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how that plays out in Germany. I guess, you know, no one's happy with it's like the US stuff, changing to a Schedule 3. It's not quite far enough, but it's a step. So I can't. I have to say, I don't think it can be too long until the US changes federal laws now that they've done this, which should mean some big changes internationally as soon as that does finally happen.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting. So we're going, oh crap, it is. It's November this year, isn't it? The next presidential election,
Yeah.
the rerun. Jesus Christ, this can be interesting. But yeah, so it still needs, even with the rescheduling thing, everyone's announced that as it's done. It's not done, folks. There's still the budgetary, and it's like 6 words. I can't remember the title of the branch within the White House. They've got to give it sort of final approval. Then obviously it needs this
Right.
big presidential seal. And frankly, if that doesn't get done before September, once it kickstarts into the thing, it's the next
Yeah, the election
president. And
process.
I'm not confident of either of these men living to next year right now, let alone them rubber stamping
Yeah.
whenever it comes. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's interesting to watch the markets react, because a lot of the companies that are pharmaceutical adjacent, or like you said, that had that big money from these pre-established industrial complexes prior, their stocks all went good. All of the real cannabis people who were like, no, we're wreck, they suddenly took a battering because of the state's rights versus federal law. So I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, my American folks here, is it Article 10? No, fucking Amendment 10? I can't remember which one it is in the Constitution, the US Constitution, basically enshrines states' rights.
Yeah.
And but if they then go federal with pharmaceutical, we don't yet know how that would be tested in courts. It's going to have to go to a Supreme Court decision ultimately, I think, to settle it. But then any one of the other states, another judge could turn it over, and I think it's going to create some new problems over here. But hopefully, like you said, if it just lifts the floor out, I'll be happy. If it means that it becomes about fines rather than like actual full criminalization, that's a step. But if they somehow manage to turn this on its head, and all of the like whatever's left of Humboldt, of the legacy growers up there, suddenly like you need a pharmaceutical license.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, I haven't read enough about it, but I'm hoping that they are bringing it in, because I presume that it's something that Biden's bringing through as something that's going to bolster his election campaign, I would hope, rather than being something just to feed some things to pharmaceutical companies, which I think obviously is less of an election winner.
Yeah, I think it's kind of dog whistling, to borrow a phrase, to the corporate investors that no, I've got your back. It's done enough that he's not going to lose the base of the anti-cannabis people have gone, oh no, you said now it's a medicine. Yes, that means you should regulate it as a medicine when it's a medicine. And so it almost it's like the perfect saying something without saying something, as we were speaking of before we
Well,
started recording.
yes,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly.
So you can read into that whatever you want.
Yeah, and different groups will be definitely reading different things into it. I think for us, actually, we haven't really read too much into it. We're just trying to stay optimistic. The Farm Bill was very good for us in 2018. At some stage, I think after the election, there'll be another Farm Bill, and we hope that that doesn't undo the work of previous Farm Bills, as we're slightly, as us running businesses in this industry, you're completely beholden to the changes that happen in these policies.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a hell of a lot of benefit. I think they'd be better off getting USDA, the Department of Agriculture
Yeah,
involved
the
and
USDA, yeah.
other things involved. I think the complication comes from chemical conversion of CBD biomass. I think that's the main issue here is that once we start breaking into other branch cannabinoids and synthetics, because they're all called hemp now and attached to that,
Yeah,
they're drugs, but it's so that's affecting the building
but they're
material, the
legal. I mean,
textile. It's yeah, exactly. And I think so when they come to crack down that, hopefully they'll kind of guillotine it and separate it and kind of go, okay, no, these things are novel psychoactive compounds. The vast majority of them, well, I'll say all of them are novel because even if the ones that are
because they're not
naturally
widely.
occurring, they've never been consumed at high enough levels in
Yeah.
isolation. So because yeah, we need more study. I've got Dr. Kelly Seaman coming back on, guys, in June. We're going to do a synthetic special, and we're going to cover the science of all of this, of what we know, what we don't know, what we should know. So that little plug. But yeah, I think that's the complicating factor. If then there wasn't consumable hemp, I hate that, hemp consumables. Do you know what I mean? Or this THCA loophole, they wouldn't have a problem with it. But then when you've got like Texas and other regions, which were considering some loosenings, I think Houston or one of the cities has got a decriminalization model in place anyway for low level. Because of the proliferation of these in every gas station and 7-Eleven selling cannabis products with big
Yeah,
cannabis
they
leaves
sell
and
all sorts
branding.
of
It
stuff.
scares the shit out of the conservative mindset person that's like, I don't want to see weed.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of these products I doubt would be so marketable if cannabis was just legal. At the end of the day, they're just business guys, opportunists, whatever you like to call them, looking at how they can establish brands, make money, whilst cannabis is still illegal. God knows what they'll be doing when cannabis is legal. I guess that either they'll be involved in that market or looking for something else. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, it's not something we are really getting into. We're focusing heavily on seeds and the grow market in the US these days.
And I think that's the thing to do is it because yeah, it feels it's like let's call it like novel market. So people kind of remember, obviously, our economy's fucked here in the UK, but maybe 10, 15 years ago, cast your minds back, folks, to that geek store you had in every shopping mall spot. What do we call them? Not malls, centers and spaces where you'd go in and it'd just be stupid, like novel things like fake dog poo. And then there'd be things that are just made to look like a thing, but not a thing. You know, it'd be like an object that's like shaped like I don't know, a fucking chopping board, but it'll say on the back, do not use the chopping board. It's that kind of service. Perfect example of this is the cannabis store in fucking Barcelona. On virtually like what every third street, something like that, there is a cannabis shop, cannabis store, brand cannabis shop in Barcelona selling delta 8 and HHCs and THCPs and all these synthetics, but they can't sell cannabis. But then the
Yeah,
clubs which
I'm not
sell
sure if they're
cannabis
even legally allowed to
are
sell
then
those
hidden.
things in Spain, but
Well, again, it's about sort of enforceability, but at the scale that
yeah.
they are as a business, I imagine they make enough money to. I'm not saying that all Spanish cops are corrupt here, folks. They may have a bit of play money to help, massage the interpretation of that rules. I personally know, I'm not going to say who you are. I wouldn't betray you. Of a company in the UK that was basically pulled in by HMRC and was caught out in one of their loopholes and was basically told, you give us 20% of what you've made, we don't give a fuck. Like it's as long as somebody is paid ultimately, as long they will allow certain discretion of certain things. And I think that's all that's happening with that. And it's kind of they're capturing and taking a lot of that tourist trap money. People that go, oh, you can smoke weed in Barcelona and then turn up and you're like, no, you can't. And then it's like it's a 600
Well,
euro
if you
fine on
can't
the
find the
street.
social clubs, then I guess, or younger maybe if they're all, yeah.
But yeah, so it should be the spaces for the initiated, like I say. But if they can be blazing in on the high street, then we should too. We should be. I want to see cannabis fully reintegrated into society, and in a sensible way. Not it wouldn't become like Amsterdam on a Saturday with fucking stag do's and whatever. If that was everywhere, the world wouldn't travel there. They would have it on
No,
their
no,
doorstep,
exactly.
and it would be self-regulated. Once the novelty wears off, yeah, there'll be 6 months to 12 months of people being like, "Way,
And I think you've
what's
got
up?"
that in New York at the moment. Is it's all relatively fresh
Yeah.
there, and just everywhere smells of cannabis, which I don't mind, but I can understand why if you're not a cannabis smoker, user, consumer, why you might find that a little bit unpleasant. And they've got, in every street we went to, suddenly there were kind of dispensaries or stores, and then out the front you've got other guys with their tables selling stuff, which was great, but I guess it's not, practical for the long run, and it'll take time, I think, but it'll level out, and you'll find that one of those shops actually by the end is the one making money, and hopefully it's the one holding the better standards and doing things properly, and employing the people that were out the front before, and training them, giving them all jobs and things.
Exactly, that it's that parlay again. It's that connection, and I think if I've been very oppositional to a lot of the legalization. A lot for obviously I speak in a lot of spaces, travel to a lot of places, and I'm very within the space. But I'm never against the people. I recognize their desire and their drive and their whatever they're trying to do. I just disagree with the blind spot that they can't see. They're going, yeah, but this money and this market, and yeah, but the guy outside on the table, he still needs to get paid too.
Yeah.
So either he needs a chance to participate with some sort of licensing scheme, and what I almost want to see, I think I've pitched this before on the podcast, it's like Dragon's Den. It should almost be all the investors in the crowd, and then all the weed people coming in and going, dude, here's my fire, here's the shit that I've got, like pitching what they've done, who they are, because ultimately that's the brands that seem to be succeeding. Again, I'm not going to call you out because it feels like I'm just criticizing you, particularly the one that comes to my mind. There are several brands within the legacy space, within the legalized space, that are legacy brands, but they are entirely owned by these corporate conglomerates. So there is that kind of best of both worlds, as it were, going on, but it then feels like it's only certain people. The money is still choosing that, which in a way it kind of should, because it's their money. But I think if we had some sort of incentive around social equity and inclusion here for something that allowed that, because we only have what we're going to have because of those people. If people didn't break the law and grow cannabis, the DEA would have succeeded. I mean, at one point, I can't remember the highest.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were destroying hundreds of millions of plants a year, wild cannabis plants. We did it in the UK. We used to have it wild cannabis. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? We went and destroyed it a decade long. I think it was 50s. We had this big fucking thing, and it was caused some problems with the chemical that we used to do it, and we still do it now. We still spray it and de-weed and various other things. It's a continuation of that. I think that if we can return it to the wild, which means decommodifying it to a certain degree, because if we want this carbon capture of it, it isn't going to be my 5 plants in my back garden or whatever that's going to help reduce my carbon footprint. It's the airdrop in 1 trillion seeds across a fucking landscape. Do you know what I mean? It's allowing it to do its damn thing, whilst still, like I said, having a reasonable commercial industry. But then, like I said, there isn't a problem unless you're a capitalist entity and you fuck over your people and you go down for a blue collar crime. It never should be anymore. The violence, the gun, the door going off, the raid, the screaming. Do you know what I mean? That shouldn't. If it's now a corporate thing, it should be treated like a corporate thing everywhere. It should be like a driving license offense.
Yeah, and that suddenly, having operated in this industry for quite a long time, we were suddenly told, certainly our activity in the US, actually, which we were just, when the Farm Bill came through, we'd been operating there previous to the Farm Bill and had always been a little bit concerned about the way we were doing things. But suddenly after the Farm Bill came in, whilst working with lawyers, that was the refreshing thing, is being told that you'd get a letter in the post rather than someone knocking on your door or coming through your door in the middle of the night. Which is why, our focus has been over in the US, and that's the way it should be, absolutely. And they are now, having been the country that was the most terrifying with their drug laws, are probably the ones that will progress quickest. I guess maybe Canada and places have previously, but I think the US is where the heart of the cannabis industry is for certainly for us. But increasingly, I think for new products, innovation and the like, it's a lot, and genetics, the US is the country to look at.
Yeah, I think 100%. For obviously, like, Spain is obviously an incredible breeding ground and space for it within Europe.
The fact the problem with Spain being is that it's been this kind of semi-legality, that nothing can be done quite openly. As soon as you can do things legally, which you can on a state level in the US, you can do massive pheno hunts.
Yeah,
do things at scale and do things openly, and that really improves the way you do things. The people coming in and looking, the auditing of process and product and the like. So yeah, which Spain just doesn't quite yet have, which we would love to see there because
Yeah,
we love Spain.
it was sort of prior to trying to read the article in my head. Was it the Dynafem? I think was one of the companies that got caught at
Yeah,
that
Dynafem
huge
have been
raid
shut down. Yeah, about
kind of
4 years
good
ago
few
now,
years ago.
maybe.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember that shook up a lot of people because everyone was like, no, everyone's. I mean, to tell an anecdote, I'm not gonna say who it was. Somebody flew me out to Ronda in northern Spain, and
Yeah, I know Ronda.
they took me to a field, 250,000 plants, and I was like, holy shit, this is a big plot. And he took us. We met the fucking local mafia in that. And then met the local cop that was obviously because everyone gets paid. The village got paid because the
Yeah.
workers from the village came and worked in the thing. So it was they obviously were quasi licensed, as it were. But yeah, there's a lot of systems like that where I would almost rather see that in a way that those people directly on the ground sort of benefit. But as you say, once you go into that protection, people are popping 10,000 fucking seeds to find a genetic, and it really allows for that. But it also then kind of bottlenecks it because then the American palate will determine what comes out. This is why we end up with a lot of everything getting crossed with cookies and shit for a while, and we end up with these bottlenecks of genetics where people go, "That's the hype one, plus this. I'm the next hype." Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's following demand, and we try not to do that, but we're definitely in that realm, and we have to be commercial as well. So
Mhm.
I have to tread carefully here, but yeah, I mean they'll set the tastes, I guess, to a degree, but yeah, it's not. I mean, a lot of it is that's where the hype is coming from at the moment, and we're not so much about the hype genetics because we want stuff that is has proved its performance really, and that
Mhm.
we can trust a bit more than hype, and also there's seeds are already pretty expensive. There's just got to be a cut-off point where I just don't feel comfortable selling seeds higher than,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean, because I know what they cost to produce, albeit R&D can be expensive, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that's what the hype is coming out of a lot of those breeders in the kind of Humboldt, LA, San Francisco region, Californian region, really. And I think that's for a reason is that they've been doing things a bit longer than most people. A lot of them moved over to get involved with the kind of Dutch market to be legal whenever it was 20, 30 years ago. And now they're back and doing it on their home turf and doing it successfully and legally and openly.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of what happened with the Canadians in Amsterdam as well. Like this is what something I would do worry about with this new legalization trial experiment sort of going off in Tilburg and Breda in the Netherlands. Um, is that this kind of granted it definitely needs regulating, needs advancing. They need to end
It's a
this
strange
the
model,
law
the
on
Dutch
it.
model.
It's incredibly strange because it's all just kind of, it's don't be a dick. Basically, it's like, yeah, you've got a 5 gram limit in a coffee shop, but you've got no limit on the street. Like, as in
Yeah,
no lawful limit on the
tolerating an
street.
illegal supply is effectively, which just seems a bit
Yeah,
strange.
but it then became over time so I think not corrupting what we think of as like hyper corrupt. It just became so normal and grandfathered in the way that the money is generated from the coffee shops that goes back in through tourism, etc., to the regions. It was kind of just an accepted calculation. What is the loss benefit here? Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
And so I think for a long time, and because of that, as we said, like people came from all over the world to bud tend. To I suppose back in the day it was dealing more than bud tending before that became really a thing. And yeah, learning the culture, the heritage, getting to meet breeders, genetics, and whatever. And as you say, once their kind of home country comes back on board, people want to go and take that back. And I just want to see, like I said, more countries and spaces have this opportunity for everybody to go at it. Granted, it will make it a Wild West for a bit. We will New York that bitch, but watch what New York will become because of this. Watch how many look fucking Washington State people. Washington State, what year are we in now? 2024. It's been 10 years since its implementation, but fucking 12 years since it passed in legislation this November. Still no home grow. Still no home grow. You've got to get the first thing right. Otherwise, they can drag their heels and make their
Yeah,
goddamn money and lock down that industry. Whereas I think New York kind of went, all right. And obviously they're panicking. And Mayor Adams is a bit duplicitous, in my opinion, because of his championing on one end and then the way he's kind of he's obviously moving with the money, shall we say, in my opinion.
sure. He's a
And
politician
yeah,
there.
and the big boys are pissed off because they're like, wait, the guy with the table outside, he's not paying tax, is he? I'm like, yeah, but the law says he's fine technically if he's gifting it, and then that person decides to gift him some money. I mean, that's how Colorado worked for the first 18 months, and they still have a gifting economy. There are so many other nuances within this that if they're not considered, then we're not going to participate in that system. If I go to the shop and buy weed, but in law it says I've got to smoke all of my weed, I can't share a joint with my mate at home, then it just it's going to put people off. And like, why would I transition from what I do? Why would I put my head above the parapet? And a lot of people also don't feel that if Thailand goes back and actually does crack down on their guns on the street and the army and things go shit like crazy, like it could do potentially in the worst imaginable way, it's gonna make everybody else feel insecure. Because if another government comes in whatever country it is, they could reverse that law. They could change that thing. Whereas if we can get to the point of the UN is where I want us to go, rip up the 88, the 71, and the 61 conventions, and then it would almost become enshrined in international law. If you're persecuting somebody for cannabis, it would switch. So the UN would be able to put pressure on each individual territory to make its drug policy conform with it being a health policy if there is addiction. If there isn't an addiction, fuck off. Your only responsibility there is to then clean supply, harm reduction, benefit maximization. You don't get to do X, Y, Z with it. And so I think that's where I hope legalization gets to. Enough countries come on board, they pressure the UN. The UN then erases that international pressure. And then we kind of go through, what do they call them? The robber barons of like the late 1800s, early 1900s, where there'll be this swell and glut of industry and huge amounts of money. And then it's kind of peter into just being globalized. Do you know what I mean? Like people just locally producing, it'll be broken down. There'll still be obviously California export, like I say, like real kebab Afghan, and there'll be like you said, like Morocco and legacy of things, and people will want that leb hash and is the market, those kind of things. But generally, it'll just be produced in smaller batches to people. It'll be your McDonald's or whatever for people who just want I want the high THC, and they're never going to be educated.
Some people will have price as their main thing they've got to consider when buying, and others want to have a look more at quality, flavor, taste, content, like you get in the food market or wine market or anything else. I think it's having that choice is what is crucial and interesting to a kind of beneficial, positive market.
100%. And I think because it's like you say, if there isn't then a passion for it, if we just become mindless consumers of the new 45% THC's out,
I think that's when you're much more likely to not minimize the harms personally, and you'll get a lot more likely to get a lot more problems, I think.
Well, isn't that the paradox? In the obviously in all these lawful markets, they suddenly go from THC is the bad thing and causes all the psychosis and all of the problems to then that's the single point of marketability. And I think it becomes the single point of marketability because of the fragility of the science. We've all been going terpenes, terpenes, terpenes. And we're like, yes, to a certain degree. Flavonoids, yes, to a certain degree. The newest science is like these volatile sulfuric compounds and these other organically occurring compounds that break down that are so much more fragile that they don't store into so different levels you can get. Basically, we're on page 1 of the book.
Difficult to quantify.
We've built this global industry. And as I said before, the difference, I could give you the same plant that I've grown and smoked the same bud, literally break it in half. 2 different experiences. Until we recognize that, we're going to have a problem with the marketing matching it, because it should be, as Uncle Kush said on the podcast, follow your nose. I may or may not have, jars of weed from different plants, and I'll know what I want to consume that moment by smelling each jar. The one that then my body goes, damn, I want that right now. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if in my head I go, no, I'm going to go with the lemon thing, or I'm going to go with this thing, or I'm going to go with that thing. It's not the same thing. It might end up mismatching. I mean, it might not think that I want what I want, but when you smell it, your body reacts. It's a visceral thing of going, no, I want that. That's how we bud tended.
Absolutely, with the right, good quality weed for 100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what creates a problem with this prescription model. Like I see Pharma Seeds dying across the high streets. I would love to see that little cross on the green cross thing. For the Pharma Seeds. On the other side, a green cannabis leaf. And then inside, for all these prescription patients, even if they can't distribute it there, you can go in and smell the products that are available for prescription. So you can go in and actually have that and figure, because that leads you far more.
I've been hearing many people would be buying if they were allowed to smell the product in the UK.
Well, I mean, again, there are some, and I think this is where it comes back to what I mentioned before of like EU GMP. And I think this is maybe where you had a problem with Pharma Seeds, or why the market is sort of lessening. You're trying to give them a, product that is regulated and qualified for this, whereas what they're kind of doing is shopping the world And they're ringing people and going, crap, we're prescribing on 20-1. They'll ring a guy, go, we need a 20-1. We can put that cultivar in. Oh, we've run out of the line of that. Get this cult. And they can, and most of them are produced to rec standards in rec markets, as it were. And then
Yeah,
once
I mean,
they
all the
come in through the
genetics are covering.
packaging, yes, but it's then, as I spoke of with many guests in the past, wouldn't you then be incentivized if you're the rec market in, say, Canada, and you also have a company that's medical on this side and rec this side? The people who are going to smell it and buy it from the dispensary and look at it and really on all of the aesthetics, you want the aesthetic product, surely. The one that
Yeah,
just meets the requirements and hits the number, you'd send that over there, and they can't smell it or touch it until they've ripped the seal. Once you rip the seal, you can't give the fucker back.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like you say, it's the opposite of leading to it, and I feel like either that or here's an idea, folks. What if you got like you should get like a what do they call it? It's a wine tasting. You know, when you get little tiny shots of glasses.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
should almost the
absolutely.
first time you go to your pharmacy, you should be like, "Can I have?" And they give you like 1 gram of each or something. So there's got to be a better method than people spending thousands of pounds to find the fucking cultivar that works for them. And in the
Yeah,
ideal model for me is they should go to that pharmacy and someone like yourself would be supplying that seed, and that prescriber could go, "Do you want to grow it?" And they would get access to the seed or a cutting. Do you know what I mean? That would be the best thing
very
in the
easily.
world for me. That would be
Yeah.
amazing if we could get something like that, that people could
But
use the
supposedly
waffle
homegrown
microphone.
cannabis is different to medical cannabis.
Yeah, it's better.
Agreed.
Well, I don't have to say allegedly. Then no, it's an opinion. So fuck you. It's my opinion. Yeah, it may be improving in terms of, like you say, aesthetic and whatever else, but in terms of the process, the way that it's sealed, the way that it's transported, the way that it's held, the way that it's
I think
distributed.
the
It
freshness as well, from what I've heard from a lot of the stuff coming out of,
yeah.
the places in London, these clinics, is that a lot of it's very dry, and I think
It,
coming
it,
in
it's
from
it's all
Australia and places.
it's old. Like you can tell
Yeah,
it's old because like they've not cropped it at like full amber. Like, but when amber and clear trichome sort of degrade, you can see sort of your grade, as it were, of like when you've kind of cropped it. And so they're cropped on God, they're cropped at about average sort of time by the look of them, but they have just a darkened age. Like the trichomes have died a lot of, especially the radiated products. If you look at them under a microscope, the trichome heads are broke and damaged.
yeah.
It's causing a degradation, and if that is where we're understanding most of these compounds are held within the trichome head, if you're breaking that down, you're losing these compounds, especially if they're volatile
Yeah.
to air, to oxygen. So it's yeah, again, it makes sense. It's
And are there, I'm not, I've had a less look at the kind of licensed market in the UK recently. Is anyone actually producing here and has a full production license?
there there is a few. I think there's a few people that have license. I don't know whether
There's definitely people that have
I
are in
don't know
the process. I've
whether
spoken to
they're at
most of them.
market. Yeah, this Hilltop, they're I think officially opened their greenhouse. I know Grow Lab Organics, obviously they're part of
In
the
Isle of
Cacao.
Man.
They I don't think have broke ground on their facility. Although it has been a while since I looked at that, so don't hold me on record there, folks. So there were a few people I think in process as to
Yeah,
whether
there's definitely a
it's
few.
literally from seed to thing. But I think yeah, if we can do that,
Otherwise, it's all import at the moment. I think,
yeah.
where's it? Australia, South Africa, Colombia, and
Yeah, so
Portugal.
Zimbabwe's producing quite a bit. I mean, you've even got like the Kingdom of like Lathos, which is like landlocked inside South Africa. They produce in fact, 100% of their market, I think, is for external distribution.
Yeah, yeah.
Morocco's come on board now. They're going to be an international producer but have no domestic market. And it's about, for me, in my opinion, that cabal of capitalists going around and going, where is the cheapest labor? Where is the easily
Which is
corruptible
what happens
government?
with,
Where is the
when you've just got tobacco producing regions producing cannabis, you've got to be a little bit worried. But I think what's happened in Canada suddenly is a lot of these smaller grows and higher quality are the ones actually being more successful now.
Well, yeah, I think Canada is. I need to get Remo back on the podcast. If I forget, somebody remind me in a
It's
couple of
great.
episodes to get Remo back on. When I had him on the podcast, he was talking about they basically, obviously, for the first few years, the Canadian government acted as like the middleman. I can't remember the name. It was the Cannabis Authority, and it's like
Yeah,
each
I think they
region.
still
Yeah,
do. The
it's
Toronto, you have
yeah,
different areas, Toronto
yeah.
and
So some regions are still ran by, but in some areas, I can't remember where Remo is. Forgive me, folks. No, I'm not going to try and guess at that. um, basically they changed the rules there, so now allowing basically what do you call it, like fork to farm to fork or whatever. So basically, from seed he could then sell to the consumer, whereas prior there had to be this intermediary of the
sure.
state, and the state got its cut, and it would just now I think that those restrictions are lifted and it's easier and there is a less of a restriction. The quality and the price margin for the people who know what they're doing, they're able to produce craft and small batch, but make
Yeah,
it killing for what it is, and it's affordable to the people that want it and know what it is.
great. Well,
And so
that sounds like a successful model.
it twinned with, like you said, the big licensed producers. There's still a lot of people love Aurora. There's a lot of people in this country who prescribed Aurora and really rate it. And fair play to anybody that wants whatever they want. And there will always be that level of market. But this is what I've been sort of intimating, I suppose, the whole podcast is, or my whole career, I suppose, is there has to be these multi layers. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
I won't be able to produce a Louis Vuitton sort of sealed cannabis that's like $1,000 inside for this one nug
Yeah.
or what, like, and that should exist for those people. But there should also be your Tesco basics.
Yeah.
And
I
every
think, like there is for any product, what we don't want to do is it going down the route of kind of tobacco like products.
Mm. Well, there's an interesting thing that I've never really thought of or asked a guest. Here you some new content. Not that any of this isn't. Surely, if we're going into a world where, well, tobacco is carcinogenic when it's smoked, and we're using that as a thing to go, let's get rid of smoking cannabis, which I think I've got my begrudges of that, but none of the evidence or data translates. They just go smoking bad because of tobacco, ergo must be bad for cannabis. But then when we look at the research around like COPD, around lung disease, around lung cancer and everything else, there isn't correlatory evidence, and a lot of people have been studying this. Cannabis is a bronchial dilator. It can open the linings of the lungs. It is can be dependent on the ratios of cannabinoids and profile, anti-canceral, anti-tumoral. It's can be. I'm not saying it's beneficial to then smoke, but what I'm arguing here is it's nowhere near the degradation, as it were, to consuming tobacco, and even then the smoking of paper and carbon, which we shouldn't be breathing in carbon. Like I said, with the consequence of that would be cancers. But if you're then taking something that's got an anti-canceral benefit, anyway, my point is they're separate bloody things, and so surely we could be incentivizing the tobacco producing countries to produce cannabis, that Tesco basics, 30 quid pouch of cannabis available in Sainsbury's or whatever.
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
I guess if
That is
places
those
like
alternatives.
Zimbabwe are getting involved, that's already in motion, I would think.
Mm.
And those will be the cheap countries to produce. I met a guy a few years ago, a Canadian, through Pharma Seeds, a Canadian billionaire who he was trying to, and I think he's probably given up by now, but I thought it was quite an interesting model, is he was looking to produce a kind of cannabis beer, so that when you go to the pub, if I wanted to have an alcoholic drink and you wanted to have a THC or cannabinoid drink, is we could sit in the same place having a different drink that worked to what we need to relax us, intoxicate us, whatever, however we're going to have, kind of thing. I thought it would be quite interesting. I've never seen
There's
enough
a
of those
there's
quality
a
drinks.
lot of people putting research development into that, and if you look at a lot of the legislation in places, there are exemptions for
Are
beverages,
there?
and
I thought the regulations were holding it back.
well,
Proper.
it's interesting because I might be misquoting myself here, folks. Tilray, one of the larger producers in America who merged with Afira, I think it is. I can never pronounce that properly in my head. And they became this huge player. They started to have to diversify when the Canadian stock market fell out, like all their stock price in the market, and it got a bit difficult for a few years. And they've become, I think it's the largest craft beer producer in Colorado. They just started diversifying their portfolio. We can't buy cannabis brands because it's unlawful under federal law in America for foreign entities to then own these companies in a direct way. You have to go through venture capital and through the usual capitalist doorways. And so they kind of backdoored it and went, let's just get adjacent things. I think who's the other one who I mentioned?
Constellation Brands put a lot of money into Canopy.
No, what's the other one? Aurora. They are one of Canada's largest craft flower producers now.
There you go.
Because they've got the extra warehouse space, and the same way British Sugar became a cannabis producer because of the excess space, CO2 it produced, etc., etc. There is that kind of
I would imagine
a natural thing to that, because I think that's exactly what people are going to look at, and I think eventually, what will be the difference? There will always be people that want to smoke cannabis. And I think maybe in 100 years or what, if you legalize tomorrow and you made vapes cheap as shit and all other potential consumables cheap and available, yes, over generations of the people. I'm a nostalgic smoker almost. I'll smoke blunts, Like, and it's what I do. I love the ritual. I love sitting and rolling. I love passing with people. I love the
Yeah.
social element, and I'm that till I die, or until touch wood, God, but my body says otherwise. You know what I mean? But that's the way that I want to consume. Doesn't mean that I don't consume other methods. But then somebody that then comes into the market and smoking is one of several choices, they might never smoke. So yes, I think it might go out of vogue or fashion, as it were, later on down the
As
line.
long as it's not
But
banned, I
but I
think
don't think that you
that's
can
fine, isn't
criminalize
it?
it. Yeah, but then if you look at the tobacco thing, which is again to loop back into it, like the fucking Rishi Sunak's like, oh, we want to. It hasn't. No, it hasn't gone through. I think they're still debating it. But
Stop the sale.
this
Yeah.
tobacco bill, yeah, that if you're born past, I think it was 2015 or whatever it was, you will never buy tobacco lawfully. And I looked at that and went, there's a tab house. A tab is a northern thing for a cigarette, for anybody that doesn't know. A tab house across the road from me. They've been there for fucking decades, and they sell cigarettes, brought in from Spain, brought in from
Yeah.
France and whatever. And they're just kind of allowed to go because people then realize they stop stealing shit because of the economics. If people could buy access to small cigarettes that they needed to feed their addiction, they wouldn't then commit other
They
petty
wouldn't
crime.
be.
So it's kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, left alone. But then they're going to do very well out of that. They're going to have a whole generation of a clientele of people that will still get access to cigarettes. It's not like if I suddenly, as an older person, went, that cigarette's not going to disappear.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's a nice gesture and idea, but I think through education and awareness, and frankly, like I've been pushing for a while, like what about CBD cigarettes, like they're doing in Switzerland? You can buy up to 1% THC pre-rolled cigarettes in Aldi in fucking Switzerland.
Mm.
And I haven't studied the effects actually. I should probably look at that to compare the data sets, but I would imagine there is a reduction of people smoking tobacco because CBD, when smoked especially, reduces the desire to smoke. Like you will smoke a CBD blunt and literally like, and you put it, keep putting it, you
I
keep
want
putting
to
it
say
down.
anymore.
Yeah,
Well,
and
there you go.
it
That's
massively helps
the
deal with nicotine addiction. Obviously, there are many major studies that are starting to support this, not beyond the placebo variability, beyond sort of independent biases. There seems to be this, if you looked at the metadata of it, a general consensus that, yeah, if you use CBD targeted with conscious intention and willpower, you have a far greater chance of giving up nicotine products.
Interesting. I haven't had to use it. Luckily, I'm pretty much there with my giving up nicotine finally at 45 years old.
Oh, well done, well done. It's a difficult one, and I think again, it's like
Yeah.
if we allow that market to continue in the way that it is, and just criminalize it here, there, change packaging and whatever, it's you only ever making it more taboo to a bunch of people that are going to get access to it anyway. If we allow
Yeah.
what about
Yeah.
real harm reduction, you can't then tax people out of it because then people break laws to make money to, or they'll get access to illegal markets or whatever. It's viable alternatives that are less
Top
harmful.
quality
Yeah,
product coming in. Yeah.
better education and better socialization. Most things of like cigarettes for people that, as you probably know yourself, you start to recognize it's the habit of, oh, I have the morning coffee. It goes with that. Oh, I would had sex. It goes with that. Oh, the mates out to step outside the pub. You know what I've, and you have these
Yeah.
moments of rituals that if you can consciously step into, and I think this is one thing that CBD helps do in that way, is kind of you can no it helps you give that little bit extra willpower to go no, and then as you build that little on little on little, you challenge these things, and everyone was there quitting, and you probably will actually. What's the last like phase cigarette you can't give up? Is it like the one before bed, the first
Well,
thing in the morning?
it's probably the one on Friday afternoon when I finish work kind of thing. And, step out of the office, maybe go for a drink. And it's that one. It's
Hmm.
like, the week's done, man. I can go and
So,
chill
so,
out
so
now.
do you think then, if in that environment, to follow this through, not just if you could drink cannabinoids in that space, but if you were okay to smoke a blunt or vape, would you think you would still be smoking or driven to or
Well,
desire to smoke the cigarettes?
the local pub I frequent, I probably can smoke. I would suddenly in the garden can smoke a blunt, no problems. But I don't know, it's still just that nicotine thing of
Mm.
the first thing is a cigarette and then a blunt afterwards generally. Or was. I'm pretty much there with it though these days.
Respect.
Children playing sport and things like that are quite a good way of making you feel very old if you're still smoking and trying to keep up with them.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. No, we're bless you for it, and long may it continue, and I hope you get to your goal, man. And yeah, it just
Thank you.
it just shows to me, and I think I worry that tobacco was quite benign. Tobacco, used to be, I don't know how many there are now, but potentially thousands of, again, cultivars of different variants through standardization of industry. Golden Virginia, I can't remember, I think it's six, seven, whatever it is, proprietary cultivars. most of the other ones, they have a lockdown thing, and that's why Richmond tastes the way it does. That's why LB
Right,
tastes
yeah.
is that kind of the cultivar slight variants of them. They're all from the same genus, but it's the same sort of thing. I don't want to see cannabis in the future locked down like that, where they've then gone and managed to fuck it up along every process. They've put additives in, so it burns better, but actually that makes it more addictive. They've put something else in that does this, but it makes it the ash whiter, like they did when they tried putting literally, what was it in the 1930s? Asbestos cigarettes.
Oh my
There was a
God.
company marketing asbestos cigarette, and the reason was it's cleaner. It burns down. It keeps all the ash together, so you don't get ashy. Like mental, and I just worry
Oh,
that's what's going. You see,
terrifying.
again, going to happen sort of with cannabis. When actually I'm not promoting this to anybody, but if you were to grow your own tobacco or whatever, again, completely different experience, completely different relationship with it, and then it's
Yeah.
ceremony versus habitual
Right.
use.
I mean, just the benefits, for those of our clients where they are legal to grow, is just the benefits of being able to grow plants and
Yeah,
talk to them, nurture them is so good for your mental health.
yeah,
And that's one of the reasons we particularly love doing what we're doing, and are really especially happy that the laws are progressing where we can, talk about people growing these plants, is because it is such a benefit. It's not actually a lot of it, and a lot of our clients will go, and they've told us this in surveys, it's not actually the smoking of it necessarily. It's not all about that. It's about the pride, the interest, the excitement of going into a tent or out into the garden. Like, what are they looking at like today? Oh, fuck. There's been a pest at them or whatever. The thing that keeps them constantly thinking, constantly challenged, constantly thinking of how they can do better for their plants.
yeah.
And it's really good and very, very healthy for people to grow plants.
100%. I think it's almost like it's a symbiosis of it's what the plant is almost doing is tricking the parental instinct. I have no interest in children, touch wood. I've survived this far to know children. I did joke this morning with somebody I was on a call with saying, I don't think I do, but I'm pretty sure I don't. And that's not my intention.
As you get through the day.
I have no drive towards that. But you say with the plants, like I've got house plants all over the place. Like is what I gained from growing cannabis was this respect of nature. I started camping more, like wild camping. I started like wild swimming and appreciating nature more because just being with it does something to it. It reminds you of something beyond these concrete cages, these
Yeah,
rectangles and right angles and the shapes and the things
for
that don't
me.
exist in nature. And your plant will always be different, and it'll be different in different days. It'll react different. And I think it does. Oh, baby, what's wrong with you? Okay, yeah, we'll get you some of this. And running at the hydro shop and going, my plant's got this. What can I? And people
Yeah,
learn from that sort of connection. And I just wish we could have that nerdiness as like mums groups, but plant fathers or whatever it is. It's just dudes be like, dude, my crop and I had this, and some other guy, oh yeah, we use this. I found that you use that, and those spaces. Yes, there are online forums, but as I always advocate, this show is wonderful, but it would be so much better if I could have the guest in person because there's something so much more meaningful to having a deep conversation with somebody in
sure.
person. And I want to see that pop up. Little nerdy cannabis clubs. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be this dangerous criminals and violence and it's cool and it's gang and nah, man. It's a fucking plant. It's a plant. Think about it, if we put cactuses where cannabis is, and you think of the gang culture and everything else that could be attached to it, that's how absurd it should be to think with
Yeah.
cannabis being there.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did, like I said, have deal with a lot of, especially in the US, a lot of home growers. So we're not in that gangland. We're in with mothers and fathers. A lot of our clients have kids. A lot of them are grandparents. Generally, we do quite a lot of try and learn as much as we can about our customers. It improves the way we sell to them and the products we offer them. But generally they're homeowners. These are people with jobs, responsible. They're all,
Mm.
good people who just love cannabis and they want to produce it for themselves. They want to control the quality. They want to control the taste, the flavor. They want it organic or they don't want it organic. They want to be able to choose and they want to be able to set what it is.
Mm.
And we think that, yeah, that's beneficial to people and should be made possible everywhere.
100%. I think if it might be a pipe dream, I might be being a bit naive, but I truly believe if everybody that could grow and wanted to grow was allowed to and was encouraged to, and they were able to, through a gifting or non-profit model or something like that, be able to provide for the people that can't or won't, then there is nothing left for the dealers. And I mean, then obviously the dealers that are good people in the market now, they could transition over into that space because then it'd be based on quality and product, not
Yeah.
just being the only guy in that area. Do
I
you know
think
what I
there's
mean?
also, and I don't know enough about it. We were speaking to a German lawyer yesterday. There's in Germany, for example, they're setting up kind of grow cooperatives, I believe. And I don't know
Mm.
the exact outlines of them, but I think they sound to me to be quite interesting things. I like the idea of grow cooperatives if done in the right way. And maybe that's the place for the dealers to get involved running those kind of things is,
Exactly. And I think there needs to be a recognition of a difference between non-profit and not making money. Like in non-profit business, you can make a 50 grand wage.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
There is still money to be made. It just means that you're not going to be able to pull 100 grand out of that business to buy
There's a
yourself a
reason there's so
Benz
many
or whatever.
charities in the
It's
world.
Yeah, and I think that that's what it needs to be because we need that money to stay in that community. And I think in a way that's why America is actually being forced to innovate, being incentivized to innovate because of the lack of federal banking. People couldn't hide that shit. The business was doing well. They've got a fucking stock room full of money. Like, go buy another location. Okay, we've made more money. Shit.
Gosh,
Start another business. Oh, shit, we're making more money. Shit. Do you know what I mean? They have to
start
spend.
digging.
Do you know what I mean? I think if there's that incentive through CIC models or whatever it is, community interest companies, etc.,
Yeah,
the money that is generated, yes, the staff make a good living wage above like just scraping by. They get a good fucking wage and maybe a profit participation, but not called profits, as it were, like a directional thing of reward, however that works. But then most of that money, I think, goes back into that community. So then if one of the members comes and goes, oh, I want to actually set up a grow at home, and then I only need 4 plants, but I've got space for 10. So then 6 of those plants, when graded by that collective, could come in and be sold. So what we could then
yeah,
do is front the money up front for them, help them get to that level, and then because we know that's a sustainable. Do you know what I mean? There's many different mechanisms by which we should be teaching each other to fish. Everybody just selling each other fish is meaning there's no fucking fish left in the water, and no fucker knows how to fish anymore. So we're going, do you know what I mean? And I think we
yeah.
have to recognize that, but that is so contrary to their argument, especially in this country, unfortunately. No, it's medical first, medical only. And I think that the healing is not in the prescribing. I think the healing is in the community. It's in the
Yeah,
being able to be nerdy, like, look what I grew. Oh my God, Dave, that is amazing. Gives a lot. Fucking hell, what did you do? Do you know what I mean? And that those
yeah,
spaces and companies can get involved and put money into that through different incentives. And there can be a whole industry that isn't about shareholders, that isn't about quarterly speculation and profits. And do you know what I mean? And I think
absolutely.
maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll give it the steel man and the best option possible. That's what Germany are trying to do incrementally. I hope so. I really do
They're
fucking hope
definitely,
so.
an interesting one for, well, suddenly everyone in Europe or just outside Europe to sit
Mm,
back and watch and see what happens. I mean, Germany are pretty close to us, and despite the fact we're not in Europe, they do lead Europe, and I think we should see wider change off the back of what happens in Germany. We've got to remember as well that the Germans are very efficient with the way they do things, so
mm.
hopefully they'll be able to make a good success out of it and keep moving on.
Yeah, yeah, I have hope. I mean, the Europe's largest or the East EU's largest economy and
Yeah,
population, and yeah, as you say, I think if fully integrated into their system, um, then yeah, it could become hyper normalized, but in a way that is acceptable for all parties, with restrictions based on etiquette and sensibility rather than criminality. So
exactly.
you know not to smoke a joint in a play park. You don't need to be told you're 250 yards away. You know, how are you going to measure that shit? Do you draw a circle around it on the ground? And do you know, like, there's so many of those arbitrary things which make sense,
Yeah,
like we were saying in theory, but I want to get to a point where we're proud of who we are. So we don't want to be a dick. We're all ambassadors of the plant. Every time you go out for a joint, you're seen in public with cannabis. People are judging you and judging the whole community based on your behavior and your response. And I think if we can remove that criminal element or the cool mystique and allure of, crime and the profits and everything else, because again, that's where the kids are going. All the guys that have the talent and the whatever, they're looking at the investor class. These are all white, privately educated, rich middle class people. You know what I mean? Whereas they then see their people and they're doing it the other way. And a lot of these legacy brands that are international dealers, frankly, and then you know what I mean, to not fucking mince my words, they're having that success and people want to follow that shit. And I can't blame anyone for either, but until you remove that artificial division and the separation, and the only way to do that is not by going one or the other. Come on, rich white folk. I said there's a fucking white dude say, he said these middle class fucking capitalists come to the table. Talk to these people. They will give you insight and information. They will give you an ability to make a far better market, but only if you give them a piece of that pie. because otherwise it's what's that African proverb? The children rejected by the tribe will burn it down just to feel its warmth.
Right, there you go.
And that's where I feel right. That's that fuck you ability again. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But yeah, okay. That's quite optimistic. Now let's do a couple of quick fires because I'm aware of the time.
sure.
So we'll round up here. Um, how much are you, obviously you seed company, how much are you into breeding? Because there's somebody I want to talk to about polyplids and triplids, but I don't know who to talk to.
Triploids.
Triploids,
I
polyploids, and
am not a
triplids.
breeder. I know a fair amount about it. We have added some triploids to our websites from two, I think probably the two first commercially available varieties. Two varieties from Humboldt Seed Company, US brand from Humboldt, and another variety from a company called Trilogene, who are based in Illinois and who we're quite closely related to. Actually, we have the same CEO in America as Trilogene, and they have a triploid variety as well. Triploids, for anyone who doesn't know, are basically varieties that are bred to not produce. It's like a seedless watermelon or a seedless grape. So these cannot produce seeds, and so particular interest in kind of outdoor cultivation spots. I know Moroccan growers have been asking a lot about them, and the Moroccan government, where I think cannabis is becoming legal now because of the pollination from all of the farms that they have. They're particularly looking at triploids, and they have good commercial application for those kind of things. Also higher, generally, you should expect higher levels of THC and secondary metabolites as well, because there no forces going into producing seeds or into that kind of stage of the plant.
So I've partially looked on this, as you can probably tell by my mispronunciations. I'm going to blame part of that on my voice as well. But so is it does because it reduces sort of the, I suppose what we would term in the parlance really like hermaphrodization, or that kind of stress led kind of is
So
it reducing that
I got to be
that
careful going into that. We've
process,
just
or
had a bit of a problem with one of our suppliers. You can still have hermaphrodites, but it will be less, and the hermaphrodite plants shouldn't produce seed.
so is it like a sterilization of the pollen? Is
It's a
that kind of what's
sterilization. So
happening?
it's yeah, sterilization of the pollen essentially. I'm not a scientist, so this is almost
Mm.
above my pay grade
Well,
too. It just makes it impossible for them to produce seeds
okay.
essentially.
So does that can you clone these plants? Can you directly just
Yes.
whack the top off? So
Yes, you can clone them.
that's the best of both worlds then, because when I first looked at it, I remember what was the phrase they were using, the Terminator seed project that Monsanto were working on, which was
Yeah.
single cycle crops, which were there was no way to self-replicate the product. It was one use, boom,
And
done.
a lot of people look at these like they're the kind of worst things to possibly come in. And that, any seed bank producing them is doing it for nefarious practices, Monsanto thoughts. Um, we don't look at it like that. Things always have to progress. It's one product amongst a whole range that we sell, and we would never go full triploids. And I think they're completely worthwhile if you are in a place where you may get cross contamination from other people's pollen. Then this is the kind of variety you want to grow to eliminate the risk of that.
Yeah, I'm hoping it just becomes kind of like a ruderalis, where it's a tool to maximize the potential of a product in a region, like I was talking about with
Exactly.
that rewilding. So yeah, and for people that are not aware, the vast majority of most of the crops that you eat food-wise, as you sort of alluded to with the watermelons before, are these triploids. So yeah, it's as long as it keeps labeled. Again, I'm think for transparency and honesty, I think as long as it's there, people can make up their own minds depending on
Yeah, I
the
mean these
science or prejudice they might have.
these aren't easy to produce. These things aren't easy to produce. They're not things that every seed company is suddenly going to have by next year. These companies have been working on them for some time. So yeah, we'll see where it goes. I don't think they're also quite a bit more expensive than normal seeds at the moment. So really, most worthwhile if you can get some additional benefit from them.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully as a building block towards better, more diverse products, then
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
thumbs up to it. I'm Trying to see what else I was wanting to ask you here on my notes. I've mentioned that we've done pretty well here. I think we've covered most of the subjects I wanted to without once looking down. Da, 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 da. Why do you think, obviously, as a businessman operating in various other regions, why do you think that the UK is currently so far behind in what I've written here to say the global cannabis arms race? Like, I know we
Um,
are and we aren't. Obviously, GW and what it's doing with its
yes.
patents and whatever else but in terms of public facing,
I think because our two-party political system doesn't really work for causes like cannabis, to be honest. I think any kind of progressive MPs or any politicians who've come with a progressive drug policy agenda, which supposedly David Cameron, I think, was the last one in any real power that was meant to have that real interest in changing things. I believe his sister had problems with drugs, and he did have a real interest in it. As soon as he got into power, other things to do that weren't as important, very sadly. Do we expect that to change? I don't think so. What I do hope will change is if and when Labour get in, is actually the political system has changed somewhat. Different, different voting and things like that will come through that may change our politics and make it a little bit more wider spread. I think also the re-rise of the Liberal Democrats will be a very good thing. I know they disappointed a lot of people, but they do have a voice on these kind of on this kind of issue that needs to be heard. And I think having the Liberal Democrats back and stronger will be a really positive thing, personally.
Just having a strong third party, regardless of its politics,
Sure.
is beneficial. Yeah, I'm when Rishi Sunak came out the other week. Sorry for my international listeners here. This is British politics. Came out the other week and was like, voting for Labour is going to be a hung parliament. I was like, why? Don't tempt me with a good time. Like, and
Yes,
if you actually
exactly.
look at modern British neoliberalistic politics, for all I disagree with both parties, the coalition of Lib Dems and Tories actually got some of the best things done that they could given the circumstance they were in, and
Yeah,
they stopped fucking austerity being half as bad as it could be, and
absolutely.
it was bad. So we exactly that stronger proportional representation, I think, would be brilliant.
Yeah,
Or as I've been pitching, I want to see the counties in the UK broken up like states. I don't see any reason why Durham, Northumbria, or any other region can't set their own policies, start to follow the devolution pathway we've done for the kingdoms and see the benefits that we're seeing there. I mean, Durham up the north here, we've got land, cheap labor, people that are used to working hard and want to graft.
yeah.
We could grow all the cannabis for the country up here. Do you know what I mean? There's enough space and industry and opportunity within this country, but we, like you say, we're shopping around Zimbabwe, we're going to Australia, we're going here, we're going there, and it's. I think once we can get them to exceed the numbers, I'm hoping the next ones, for all they might be, we don't like that cannabis. We can go, yeah, but billion, hundred.
Yeah.
You like that number?
I,
You like this number? You like that number? You know what I mean?
I think also potentially, and I'll blame him for a lot of things. The problems in this country is the press in the UK is mostly owned by Rupert Murdoch, who
Mhm.
obviously hasn't been on side. I would imagine in other countries there's probably a little bit of a wider spread of ownership of the
Mm.
mainstream media.
Yeah, I think the press one is a huge one. I think we would do a disservice to not close this off by sort of saying the skunk narrative, which allegedly was supported by GW and various people that wrote under pseudonyms for newspapers. I'm not going to intimate more than that because I don't want to get sued. I don't have
And
anything, but I know what I need to
GW did
become.
buy the rights to Skunk Number One, and
Yes, and it's yeah,
it's a
the
different product, I
narratives, the
believe.
timeline, it's all very, very interesting. At some point, I probably should write a piece on this and stick my head above the parapet. I'll add that to my list of things to do, guys. But yeah, that skunk narrative, like you said, the counter to it, the GW were able to onboard and then get British sugar and start producing all this amount and then selling it to T-Bex in 26 countries. When at the same time it was literally like street skunk causes, man to we didn't that's not one of our stories, but it was from America. I think it was the guy that masturbated and cut his dick off because he was high on weed, or at least that's what the story tried to make it look like. Like it's
Right.
those kind of sensational, insane stuff. That's a mentally ill person
Yes,
that had cannabis in their system. Don't equate these things. Do you
yes,
know what I mean? And so I
absolutely.
think because of that, they've created such a boogeyman in this country that they need this safety of medical to like climb down. And then once that's all
Yeah,
established in the
yeah,
mind,
you're
then they go
probably very right with that.
step down to the next thing. Whereas other countries, I don't think they had it half as extreme. So it's a lot easier to sort of move towards more like Netherlands discretion, like de facto or de jure de facto decriminalization.
Well, in that
Yeah,
case, then we can put more of the blame then on the media, and at the end of the day, our politicians are mostly at the behest of the media and of Rupert Murdoch. So let's put it all on Rupert Murdoch.
yeah, yeah. Well, he's I think 93 now, maybe.
Definitely
He did
getting
just
there.
marry again, so Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. But he's probably not going to be around much longer, and it's I don't want to celebrate the death of anybody, but
No, but the
he's
breakup of
lived
his media
he,
empire will be a good thing for the UK.
massively, and he's 93 again. It's like somebody said to me, it was somebody I respect on Twitter when the Queen died, went, "Oh, that was unexpected." And I literally just responded with it because I think she was like 93 as well, or 92 or
Yeah, she
something.
was.
I just responded with her age. And the guy went, "Oh yeah, fair play." I'm like, if you're up there, you're up there. You're cool. Like, so you can be mourned and whatever, but you've done your life. But yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this. Let's wrap this up here, Tom. I can see us having another conversation again in the future because I see
Definitely.
Seedsman ever advancing around in different markets, and I think yeah, you're a good touchstone for those various things. Being, I was going to just say an Englishman, but that almost sounds derogatory. But did you know what I mean? As somebody that then has that international presence, but has the
Sure.
UK mindset, as it were. So yeah, I would very much like to use you now as my point of contact for sort of breeding and seeding.
Definitely. And the other person I can recommend you might be worth having on is a guy called Dr. Gary Yates. I don't know if you've met Gary.
Yeah, I've had Gary on before and would
You
like to get him
have,
back on again. Yeah,
because
he's
he's
good
my,
crack.
when I need to go a step higher on the plant science base, he's the person I go to, and he really knows his stuff and gets it from an academic perspective.
Nice, nice. Well, you just reminded me to then reach back out to Gary and get him back on the podcast. But yeah, I will ask you now my new last question, which didn't used
Sure.
to be my new last question. My old last question used to be, what does the future hold? But yeah, it's kind of ambiguous. So here's a far more ambiguous question. What are we not talking about, and what should we be talking about, sort of in the cannabis space or in general?
Oh, John, that's a good question and one that I'm going to struggle. What are we not talking about? We are, I mean, my point would be, but we've just talked about it for quite a long part of this, is just making sure we include legacy players in the market going forward. I think that's not being talked about enough by the people that are actually changing the laws. It's probably
Mm.
being talked about more by you and me, but not actually by those who are really wielding the power, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, it's a good point, and I think yeah, we've uh made that a major bullet point of this podcast. So hopefully that will yeah reverberate in some ears and in some minds.
I hope so.
Yeah, where can wait, here's your plug section. What do you want to plug?
So where can people find us? Firstly, our website, www.seedsman.com is our principal website. I think it's seedsman.official on Instagram, Seedsman Seeds, or we have a Facebook community as well. I can be found on Instagram at Tom_Seedsman if anyone has any questions or would like to follow. Although I'm not the most active poster, but yeah, do hook on.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I will tag you on various platforms and include links below it. I'm not in probation with the YouTube at the minute, so I'll try the Seeds link and see what happens. Might get in trouble by YouTube, but whatever. We'll have
Yeah,
a
good
go. We'll
luck.
have
It's
a
always a
go.
bit risky with social media, our business.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, all that's left is to thank you once again, Tom. I will let you get off now and I'll do some housekeeping and rest my goddamn voice.
Brilliant. Simpa, take care, and I hope that voice gets better soon.
Cheers, brother. All right, best of luck with giving
Great
up
to see you,
smoking and
mate.
peace and love. All right, catch you
Cheers,
in a bit.
man.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Well, there you go, folks. That was Tom Raikes from Seedsman, amongst other things. I do hope you enjoyed that conversation. I do also apologize for the sound quality of my voice. I don't know what it sounds like on your end. It sounds pretty terrible, reverberating around in my brain. But yeah, I hope this has not caused any audible irritation to anybody of my audience. Hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tom, and yeah, links below if you want to check out Seedsman, you want to check out sort of Tom on social media, you want to keep an eye on sort of what they're doing. Then yeah, check out links below. I am not going to keep you much longer because my throat and voice is killing me. Um, Yeah, been a pleasure as always, folks. Thank you for dropping by. If you enjoyed this, please do give us a like, a share, subscribe, a rating, a stars up, thumbs up, whatever it is on your platform you do to show appreciation. I appreciate you for it. Check out simpalife.com for exclusive articles, blogs, and my back catalogue of Weed World articles. Yeah, if you really enjoyed this, please do check us out on patreon.com/simpalife, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, month, whatever it may be, depending on your caffeine intake, you can help me keep the lights on this little project. All right, we'll be back next week with somebody. It'll be awesome. All right, be great to each other. Peace and love, folks. I am kind of hoping to just hit a point where my throat goes, all right, you can talk.